Episodes 1 and 2 of Jeeves and Wooster will be in video shops from Monday the 21st of May. Episodes 3 to 5 will be available later in the year.
Bank Holiday Monday on TVS flies into action at 6 with a Run the Gauntlet Alpine special. 4 international teams battle it out in the Swiss Alps in a series of spectacular and breathtaking challenges. And at 7, the stars, the despair, the controversy, the budding heroes, the goals, the skill, and the fans can only mean the greatest game on earth, which may not be the description of Strike It Lucky, but Michael Barrymore does his best.
Singers, we go! Sing, come on, lads, sing, we go! We'll take the world away!
At 9:30, classic comedy with Trading Places.
I'll bet that man could run our company as well as your young Winthorpe.
Are we talking about a wager, Randolph?
Champagne for everybody! Courtesy of Billy Ray Valentine.
Why is someone deliberately trying to ruin my life?
And with the 500s, This Is Your Life at 8:30. That's Bank Holiday Monday here on TVS.
Next, the ITN Weekend National and International News.
When you're a member of National Breakdown, wherever you are, just one free number puts you in touch with our control centre for fast action around the country, around the clock. Our controllers, who all have mechanical experience, can understand your problems.
Sounds like your thermostat.
And ensure help's on its way within minutes by choosing the right one from over 1,500 approved National Breakdown agents. One who's local to you. That's what makes our prices low. And now European breakdown cover is included free in our top schemes. Pick up details at any NCP car park. National Breakdown. Always on call. Nationwide.
Here we are enjoying a drop of pure Holsten in Hamburg's famous Café Kieser. Famous because the women have to ask the men to dance, what we might call a lady's excuse me.
Hallo, kleiner Engländer.
And now I know what. Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, please, excuse me.
Holsten Export, a pure beer in a wicked world.
Hip bone replacements are known to wear out. ICI is working on a material that could last you a little longer. World problems, world solutions, world class.
Where is Dad? Who surveys the house? What about mortgage rates? Insurance? Local searches? Why isn't there more help when you do it the first time?
But there is. Lots of it, and discounts too. With our first-time buyers package. Make a beeline for N&P.
New, longer-lasting Sure for men. At the end of the day, it won't let you down.
In 20 minutes, Brian tries to turn his pub into an art gallery, but he gets a strange reaction in Not With a Bang.
The news from ITN.
Syria accuses Britain of blocking the way to hostages' release. Freed American tells John McCarthy's friends he's in great shape. Europe says soccer violence closes the door again on English clubs. And the Scottish fishermen who net an explosive catch. Good evening. Syria has tonight accused the British government of blocking progress towards the freeing of British hostages held in Lebanon. The Syrian foreign minister has told ITN that he believed that British politicians didn't seem to care. Iran's parliament today attacked America for failing to demonstrate goodwill over the freeing of 2 of its hostages.
In Beirut's southern suburbs today, the talk was of Hezbollah's fallen martyrs in the war against Israel. Hostages, though they may be imprisoned close by, were not on the agenda. Iran having suspended, for now at least, use of its persuasive powers in Beirut. Syria, whose troops control the Muslim areas, blames Washington and London for not responding positively to the recent hostage releases. And according to Syria's foreign minister tonight, hopes of freedom for the 4 Britons is being severely inhibited.
The British government is doing nothing, to secure the release of their hostages. There are certain politicians in London who do not want this issue to be resolved. Who do not care, to see their hostages kept in prison for political reasons,
What politicians do you mean?
I am not going to elaborate on this.
Do you mean the Prime Minister?
You said it, not me.
A clear sign that while Syrian policy claims to help all hostages, British interests could be better served if Anglo-Syrian relations were improved. Brent Sadler, ITN, Damascus.
In Washington, the released American hostage Frank Reed has been meeting relatives and friends of those still being held, including Britain's John McCarthy and the Irishman Brian Keenan. He's also revealed how his kidnappers beat him severely after he'd twice been caught trying to escape.
Former hostages Robert Polhill and Frank Reed were the guests of honour at a lunch to bring them, their families, and the families of the remaining hostages together.
Look at her, isn't she beautiful?
For John McCarthy's friend, Jill Morell, it was the first meeting with the man who had told her McCarthy was still alive.
It was the best news in 4 years.
Yeah, we're going to do it, I think.
Earlier, I talked to Mr. Reed about John McCarthy and Belfast man Brian Keenan.
He did have 2 passports, and he had one of them was Irish and one of them was English, and he claims and disclaims anything on the English side. He is an Irishman, will stay an Irishman, wants to be an Irishman, and even has told his captors that when he's released, he wants to be released to the Irish side. Now, Johnny, I left them Saturday night. Both of them, physically, in terms of muscle development, probably the best shape they've ever been in their lives. They're doing quite a bit of reading. We have, over the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, always received a lot of books. So they're keeping their minds going, and they've been fortunate. I spent probably 2.5 years in solitary confinement, where they were fortunate to have the 2 of them together at all times.
Any message about Terry Waite? Do you know anything at all about Mr. Waite?
Never. We have not. The only thing we ever had was on a radio. We had a radio for a short time and knew that he was being considered as his name, but we have not seen, talked to anything to Terry.
Later, at a press conference, Frank Reed described in graphic detail the harrowing conditions he'd had to endure.
I have been lying on my back literally for 3.5 years, chained either to a wall or a radiator. I had some matches. And all the carbon that came from that matches, I drew on the back of the door of my cell a picture of my son. So that when they opened the door, they couldn't see that I had done that. And on the ceiling above my head, I drew a picture of my wife.
2 escape attempts resulted in severe punishments.
During the first attempt, part of my punishment, and I won't go into the details of that, they tried to break my feet and hit my feet many, many times with iron reinforcement, cement reinforcing rod, and my feet have been slightly broken. One pig of a man who constantly haggled me and raggled me, broke my ribs, kicked my ribs on the right side, and I managed to somehow push them back, lie on my back.
Reed endured 2 years solitary confinement. He was beaten about the face and his kidneys clubbed by rifle butts.
But I had made up my mind after having over about 1,000 escape ideas to give it up, because the bottom line at that particular point, any time you escape, is somebody's death. And although I once was willing to sacrifice that for freedom, I decided I couldn't do any more, and I'd wait them out.
And he continued his sharp criticisms of those who refused to negotiate with the hostage takers.
And when you don't talk about trading, that is when you lose face. And I can tell you we had some not so nice things about some people, our thoughts, who we thought weren't willing to trade and negotiate for our lives.
Having listened to Mr. Reed, Jill Morell's mood of elation had changed.
To hear the descriptions of the captivity in such graphic detail is just so... It is so sobering to hear it. I don't know, it's mixed emotions.
But the determination to free the hostages is unchanged. Alistair Stewart, ITN, Washington.
The new president of European football's governing body, UEFA, Lennart Johansson, has said that yesterday's soccer violence has probably destroyed any chance of English clubs returning to European competition next season. The sports minister, Colin Moynihan, is travelling to Italy tomorrow for talks with European soccer bosses before next month's World Cup. But tonight, Mr. Johansson said he was saddened because the violence at the Bournemouth-Leeds game had closed the door to England for the immediate future.
I think that this turns the clock backwards again. That will be very difficult for me to convince my fellow colleagues in the executive committee to rush to bring English clubs back in competition again. I'm sorry to say that, but this is the situation.
The weekend violence has come at a bad time for English football. Tomorrow, Sports Minister Colin Moynihan goes to Italy, as he did 5 months ago, where fears of what English fans will do in the World Cup will have increased. Today, he called on magistrates to use new powers they have to ban convicted hooligans from travelling to international matches.
Now that, to me, is the sort of tough penalty that is required. We now have it on the statute book, literally within the past few weeks. I hope the courts use these tough penalties that are now at their disposal.
But these scenes make it less likely that English clubs will have any matches abroad to play in. They'd hope next season to be back in Europe, where they used to do well. Today's comments by UEFA's president means there's now little chance of that happening. Meanwhile, those who run English football are being criticised by Bournemouth police, who say they asked back in June for the fixture to be moved to avoid trouble.
They had every opportunity then to move the fixture. They said they couldn't do that. Then I made informal requests a few weeks ago again for it to be moved.
Clearly, with hindsight, I think one might have given it greater priority last June when there was a greater opportunity of rearranging this match at some other time during the season.
The league says because of the trouble it may now ban bank holiday matches at seaside resorts altogether.
After the worst mob violence Bournemouth has seen, peace has returned to the town. But police remain on standby. Last night, 700 officers in riot gear moved in force. Celebration parties erupted in violence, the Leeds fans targeting members of the public and police. Snatch squads charged onto the beach. Wielding truncheons, they made their arrests. In all, 86 people were arrested over the weekend. 30 fans appeared before a special magistrates sitting today, charged with public order offences. Most of them were remanded on bail and told to leave Dorset within an hour. Lisa Hampeley, ITN, Bournemouth.
The Conservative Party chairman Kenneth Baker says his party is on the road to recovery following the better-than-expected local election results. But some backbench MPs are warning the Cabinet not to rest on its laurels, and one, Barry Porter, today called on Mrs Thatcher to resign, saying although she's done much for the country, it's now time to go.
Mrs Thatcher, at church this morning, did get some relief from the local election results. But one poll says 2/3 of voters still want her to stand down, and one formerly loyal MP has a blunt message for her.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.
The party chairman said he wasn't rattled, but surely one day the party would say thank you and goodbye.
Yes, but I don't think that's come at all yet for Margaret Thatcher. Not at all. We fought a very successful campaign, and we've done very well, and which shows that we can come back from a very bad position, because the last 4 months has been seen a period of virtual hysteria, with our support running right away to a deficit of 25-28% one day. But that was not reflected when people actually had to vote.
But it's clear party discontent with Mrs Thatcher and the demands for revision of the poll tax have not been ended by the local elections. And Friday's inflation figures will be a fresh focus for discontent. Budget increases added to petrol price rises and the impact of the poll tax could push the figure above 10%. Her opponents in the party say the relief Mrs Thatcher gained from Thursday's elections will be short-lived. Despite the fighting words of the party chairman, the discontent among some Conservative MPs seems as sharp as ever. And there are those who predict that when they gather again here next week, the campaign against Mrs Thatcher, rather than dying away, will begin in earnest. Peter Allen, ITN, Westminster.
10 prisoners are staging a rooftop protest at Dublin's Mountjoy prison. The protesters, some of whom are said to have the AIDS virus, are complaining about medical facilities in the prison.
10 prisoners from Mountjoy's isolation wing are still on the prison roof tonight. Their major complaint is that the wing houses prisoners who are HIV positive side by side with inmates who have other illnesses. It had all started after 3 o'clock when the prisoners used a fire escape to get onto the roof. The governor was called in, and with a team of officers he began behind-the-scenes talks with the inmates. They're thought to be demanding the total closure of the wing. 4 of the prisoners who shouted down that they hadn't got AIDS are demanding transfers to other prisons.
Have you got any food?
Oh! Are you going to stay overnight?
Relatives of the prisoners are now at the jail, hoping to persuade the men to avoid a confrontation with officers in riot gear, said to be standing by inside Mountjoy.
The government is to investigate claims that large amounts of explosives and detonators made by a subsidiary of ICI have been found in the Scottish estuary. ICI say they're very concerned about the find. The explosives were hauled out of the Firth of Clyde by fishermen, 10 miles from a former dumping zone.
Fishermen in the Clyde estuary say they've been harvesting a deadly cargo from the deep waters of the west coast. Large quantities of high explosives and detonators. ITN was showing these detonators said to be among hundreds that keep turning up. And some skippers are netting huge quantities of explosives dumped there under licence from a factory on the coast.
We get several types of detonator. This blocks of explosive and paper-wrapped gel ignite cases, but there doesn't seem to be any